Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, request that proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that Clayle Klinklepeel, an intern on my staff, be given privileges of the floor for the duration of the day.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it's quiet around here today, this afternoon. We've just been notified that we're not going to be having any further votes this week because Washington, D.C. is in the grips of anticipating a winter storm. It's March the 4th, and I think most people here in Washington had hoped that winter had already come and gone, but that's not the case. In my home state of New York, in my home state of Alaska, this is the time of year that we welcome winter. We embrace winter. In fact, I'm going to be going up to the state on Friday to attend the kickoff of our biggest sporting event, which is the Iditarod sled dog race, 1,100 miles, where about 70 teams of dogs and intrepid mushers make the trek, typically between the Anchorage area and 1,100 miles up to Nome. Well, this winter has been a little bit different. It's warmer back home than most of us Alaskans would like, and we've actually had to reroute the Iditarod the second time in the race's history. It's going to be starting out of my hometown in Fairbanks, and rerouting the race so that it's still a 1,000-mile race, but it does speak to the fact that we're seeing some changes up there, at least for this winter, in terms of our temperatures and our climate. So you have a lot of folks around here, again, anticipating what we're going to see tomorrow, that are wondering what is going on with climate. What are we seeing? Is this temporary in nature, or are we going to start seeing more Arctic conditions here on the eastern seaboard? Well, Mr. President, I want to talk about the Arctic today. I want to talk about the value of an amazing part of the globe and the opportunities that we have in the Arctic, the opportunities that we have as an Arctic nation. We've got a map here. This is the bathymetric chart of the Arctic Ocean. It's a view that perhaps most Americans are not intimately familiar with. And you look at it and say, you know, where on planet Earth is this? Well, just to locate everybody a little bit, here you've got Russia, Greenland, Canada over here, and the United States. This is the state of Alaska here with all of the interior Arctic areas there. But an amazing mass located at the top of the globe. And an area where, quite honestly, most Americans kind of put it out of sight, out of mind, and the only time they really think about the Arctic is when their temperatures where they are make it feel like the Arctic. So there's probably going to be a lot of folks here in Washington, D.C. tomorrow that are thinking, yeah, maybe we do live in an Arctic nation because I'm feeling it here. Well, it doesn't make any difference whether we've got a storm coming at us, or whether it's the heat of the summer in Washington, D.C., or the fall up in New England, or the warm winter temperatures in a place like Arizona. Wherever you reside in this country, you are part of an Arctic nation. Mr. President, I'm willing to bet that when you were elected to the state of Colorado to represent the state of Colorado, you didn't think at that time that you were also elected to be a senator for the Arctic. But in fact, you are. because we are an Arctic nation. So in Colorado, I suppose you're probably now thinking, well, tell me why the Arctic is relevant to Colorado, other than the fact that we also share some good winters and have an appreciation for the snow and colder climates. But in your state of Colorado, 30%, 30.5% of the total exports that go out of Colorado are exported to Arctic nations. Now think about that. 30% of what goes out of Colorado is exported to an Arctic nation, one of the 8 Arctic nations: Canada, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden. These are your trading partners right here, Mr. President. Our colleague from Wyoming was just on the floor. Let's see what Wyoming exports. They're about in the same category as Colorado. 28.3% of the total exports from Wyoming are exported to the Arctic nations. So when you think about the dollars that are coming to Colorado or Wyoming or Maryland as a result of your exports from your state, it causes you to maybe perhaps look at the Arctic a little bit differently. We have an opportunity, Mr. President, to build upon a dynamic relationship and evolving part of the globe as we prepare as a nation to assume the chair of the Arctic Council. This event will take place on April 25th, just a couple months from now. But the Arctic Council is the intergovernmental forum for the 8 nations that have territory inside the Arctic Circle. And again, this is pretty much this map here: Canada, Russia, Denmark, through Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and then, of course, by virtue of the state of Alaska, the United States. The Arctic Council also includes 6 non-voting permanent participant groups that represent the indigenous peoples of the Arctic. There's also 32 observer entities. And the interesting thing with these observer participants, 12 of the 32 are non-Arctic nations. So areas that are not countries that you would think of that would have a keen interest in what is going on with Arctic policy. This is France, Germany, the United Kingdom, China, Japan. What is really impressive to me is that we're seeing the growth in the number of non-Arctic nations that are seeking observer status. Back in the 2013 Arctic Council ministerial meeting that we had in Sweden, 6 nations were admitted as observers. Many others have indicated their interest as well. It's also interesting to note that with the admission of China, all 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are now members or observers of the Arctic Council. Also represented are 8 of the world's 10 largest economies based on GDP, which an indicator of the level of importance that the world ascribes to the Arctic. So what is happening with the Arctic is again, a keen interest from all over the globe in what is happening. Why is that? What is going on that is capturing the interest, the imagination, the opportunity for nations all over the globe? And so much of it is because this area, an area that for most has always been kind of locked up in a world of ice and permanently frozen in time. And so to even imagine the possibilities of what could unfold in the Arctic was so foreign that only the most adventurous of the explorers ever pushed out. Well, it's changing up north. Whether it's the Northern Sea route coming across on the Russian side, whether it's the Northwest Passage, whether it's nations that are looking to explore for resources, whether it is those involved in maritime traffic and engaging in a level of commerce that are looking for that shorter route that will cut days, weeks off of a journey, and therefore costs off of the expense of shipping. Whether it's the tourist, cruise ships, Mr. President, are coming across the top. Up in Point Barrow, right up here at the top of the world, you've got cruise ships that are moving through those waters. The ultimate eco-tourists, but those that are seeking something different. The Arctic is notable within the international community from an economic perspective as shipping lanes open up. We have additional areas that become accessible for resource development. And again, tourism is on the rise. And it's also notable from a political perspective as the region it's not bogged down by the inertia of longstanding disputes. You think about so many parts of the world where you have battles, whether they be religious or border or political battles that have gone on for decades, if not centuries. This is an area, this is a part of the world that doesn't have that overlay, if you will. It doesn't have the entrenched views that make international cooperation in other areas difficult. Instead, it's an area that seeks to promote collaboration and remain a zone of peace. Think about the conversations that I'm able to have with Secretary Kerry, as I did just a few weeks back, talking about the Arctic and being able to tell the Secretary of State, speak to him about how we can work more collaboratively, how we can keep an area a zone of peace as he deals with these hot spots all over the globe. To know that there is a cool place, not only from a physical perspective, but perhaps from an emotional and a political perspective, where perhaps we can be working together to advance goals and initiatives, rather than constantly being at issue with one another. It's also a region that's writing its history as we speak. This has been around for a long time, but what is happening at the top of the globe is it's like a clean sheet. It is an opportunity for us to write history. It's even more important for the United States to take a lead in guiding international policy decisions within this area. And this is where I'm calling on colleagues in the Senate to join me, to step up, to help us not only build out policy initiatives, but really take that leadership role as we should be doing as an Arctic nation. So I have joined together with the senator from Maine, Senator King, to form a new caucus. And I know we got plenty of caucuses around here. But I am asking colleagues to consider joining this Senate Arctic Caucus. This has a mission to convene conversations among members on issues relating to defense, science, energy, environment, commerce, trade, maritime affairs, the well-being of the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, to raise awareness about the importance of the Arctic and to advance a coordinated effort towards investment in infrastructure that will benefit all Americans, including those who live in the Arctic. And I should let colleagues know that when I'm offering this opportunity to join a caucus, it's not just to say, yeah, I'm paying attention to Arctic issues in name only. We really want to try to educate. Because again, I think the awareness of what is happening in the Arctic has captivated the imagination and the attention of people around the world, of nations around the world. It should captivate the imagination and the attention of every member in this body. So each one of you will be receiving an invitation to join this caucus, along with a breakdown of your state's exports to the Arctic region, really demonstrating why the Arctic matters to all 50 of the states. So as I've outlined to you, Mr. President, about the benefits that Colorado receives and the benefits that Wyoming receives, all members will be getting that. It was 10 years ago I started an Arctic awareness campaign. It was a long time ago. And it was an effort to get folks, not only within the legislative body, but within the administration, to pay attention to what was going on within the region. And it started out pretty simply. I can remember I was on the Foreign Relations Committee, and we had the nomination hearing for Condoleezza Rice to be Secretary of State. And I asked her a question about, so what are we doing in the Arctic to ensure that the Arctic remains a zone of peace, or something to that effect? And I think I caught her flat-footed. The next time I saw her before the Foreign Relations Committee, she was up to speed and engaged, but I can state with some certainty here that in 2005, the State Department was just not prepared to have a discussion with these issues. Now, I'm not going to claim full credit here, but move forward a little bit with the clock. It was good to see the movement within the administration. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she was the first Secretary of State to participate in an Arctic Council ministerial meeting. And I think that was probably prompted by some visits that she had taken to view the Arctic, including the U.S. Arctic in Barrow when she was a member of this body. But as Secretary of State, she traveled to Nuuk, Greenland in 2011. I accompanied her. And then in 2013, Secretary Kerry went to the ministerial meeting in Kiruna, Sweden. And now in 2015, Secretary Kerry will again participate in this year's meeting in Canada, where the Arctic Council chairmanship will be handed over to the United States. I started off my comments by talking about what's going on with the weather and people feeling like we're under an Arctic siege here right now in Washington. But I think it is safe to say that Arctic awareness is at an all-time high. But unfortunately, the investment has not matched the interest. And one barometer of your interest when you're talking about the Arctic is, how do you move in the Arctic if it's ice up there? You have to be able to plow through some ice. And this is where an icebreaker comes into play. But icebreakers are expensive. Coast Guard estimates it's going to be about $1 billion. Takes about 10 years to build. Mr. President, if I were to ask anybody in this body how many icebreakers the United States have, I think you would say, well, of course we've got an icebreaker up there. We have one medium-strength icebreaker, the Healy, who does a good job for us. But our only polar-class vessel, the Polar Star, is on assignment to Antarctica for the next 5 years. We won't see her in the Arctic for 5 full years. The life expectancy, the useful life of the Polar Star, is only 6 to 8 years. It takes 10 years to build a new one. We are sitting here as a nation woefully behind when it comes to Arctic infrastructure, if you define it by icebreaking capacity. Russia is cleaning our clock in terms of the number of icebreakers that they have. They've got 27. Our own Coast Guard's high latitude study says that it's going to require 6 major icebreakers, 3 heavy and 3 medium-sized icebreakers to fulfill its statutory requirement. Even China has 1 icebreaker. They're building 6 more. India, Mr. President, do you think of India as an Arctic nation? They're considering building an icebreaker. Why? Because they see the Arctic opportunity. They want to be part of an area on the globe that is piquing the interest for a host of different reasons. So, as others in the Arctic region, whether it's Russia or whether it's Canada, as they continue some pretty aggressive national plans, combined with state investments to develop their Arctic resources and advance commerce in the North, the United States needs to be a participant, but we need to be more than just a participant. We need to be a leader. We lead everywhere else. We lead to the moon. We know more about mapping of Mars than we know about mapping in the Arctic. We need to step it up. And it's exciting to think that we can step it up. I am hoping that we'll be able to focus our attention on these issues, and it's not just the resources and infrastructure that will make the Arctic a national priority. It's not just preparing for a 2-year chairmanship. It's about what the vision is, the long-term vision for the United States' role in an emerging part of the globe that is as dynamic as any place out there. But we've got to be ready. We lack certain basic infrastructure needs. I mentioned the need for icebreaker. I'm going to be introducing legislation, hopefully very soon, to develop a solid foundation and put some building blocks in place for that investment, including a focus on obtaining more accurate data for charting the Arctic. We simply are so far behind in our hydrographic charting. But also other things. We need to do better with our ice forecasting, with our weather observing stations, with our weather buoys, with our monitoring out in our oceans, with just having a level of communications and understanding what we have. So, as we look to the area, we have to at least be able to assess the accuracy of Arctic weather and water forecasting. We have to be able to understand whether or not we've got gaps in Arctic weather and sea ice observing networks, the status of our sea ice analysis and forecast services. So we're going to be having a hearing tomorrow morning in the Energy Committee. We may be the only committee that is open for business. We may be the only senators that are here in the building, but we're going to be having the first ever hearing on the Arctic. And I think it's fair to say that it's not only the first hearing in the Energy Committee, but the first ever hearing on the Arctic as a whole, instead of just bits and pieces of it. So I'm encouraging all my colleagues who may be locked out because you couldn't jump on a flight quick enough or you can't get on the road soon enough. But we will be having, I think, a very informative hearing tomorrow within the Energy Committee to focus on what, again, I'm calling Arctic opportunities. I don't know if the timing of the hearing was just prescient on my part and we knew that this was going to happen. If so, I should also do part-time work as a weather forecaster. But I do think that it is certainly timely. In fact, it is long past time that we focus, again, on an area that hosts amazing promise and opportunity for leadership as a nation. And I would encourage all of my colleagues, join us with this new Senate Arctic Caucus. Embrace your inner Arctic self. It really is a good place to be. With that, I see that my colleague from Wyoming is here. He's been very patient. And as I mentioned to the senator from Colorado, our presiding officer right now, Colorado enjoys good benefit from the state of Alaska, and you find folks in Wyoming, 28% of your total exports from the state of Wyoming do go to Arctic nations. So there's your connect, and look forward to working with both of you colleagues as members of the Energy Committee on these issues of great importance to our nation. With that, I thank my colleagues and I